Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. An urgent briefing convened by President Andrzej Duda began at noon at the headquarters of the National Security Office in connection with the war in Ukraine and the expected Russian offensive from Belarus. The meeting was announced this morning by the head of the National Security Bureau. This afternoon, President Andrzej Duda invited the Prime Minister and ministers to a meeting at the National Security Office. The president will want to discuss the current security situation and allied policies related to the war in Ukraine. Over the weekend, the media was circulated with information that Poland would transfer to Ukraine all the Leopard tanks that supply the Polish army. The rumor was debunked on Radio Z by the head of the Polish president's International Policy Office. There is no talk here. This is absolutely disinformation about the transfer of all Leopards or a very large number of Leopards. We are talking about the transfer of a few and only in the participation of a coalition of several countries. This matter is ongoing. Consultations are going on. Also, this afternoon, there is to be a meeting between the president, the prime minister, and the defense minister. In the face of the Russian threat, Poland is constantly expanding its military arsenal. Today, Deputy Prime Minister and head of the Defense Ministry, Mariusz Błaszczak, announced the creation of the 1st Legion Infantry Squadron. The division will be equipped with modern weapons. The 16th Mechanized Division, as far as tanks are concerned, will be equipped primarily with K2 tanks. The 18th Division in Abrams, the Podlasie Division, both equipped in K2 and Abrams. The idea is to maximize the use of modern weapons. The first K2 tanks are already part of the equipment of the Polish army, and Abrams are expected to arrive this year. I am very happy that this division will be established on the territory of my region, because we are the first region that could suffer if any invasion, which I hope will never happen, was to ever threaten us from Belarus or the Suwałki Gap. This is good information. Meetings at the National Security Office have been held regularly since the Russian invasion of Ukraine last February. In addition to the situation beyond Poland's eastern border, the meetings also discuss energy security and the reconstruction of Ukraine after the end of the war. I don't have the knowledge that our politicians have, but the fact that this meeting has been convened could mean that important decisions are about to take place in the future that will determine aid to Ukraine. The reason for the urgent meeting called by the President of Poland at the National Security Office, among other things, is the information that Russia is planning to attack Ukraine from Belarusian territory. I spoke with people from several regions. I learned from people from local authorities that it is almost 100% certain that on January 16th, a week from Monday, mobilization will be announced in Belarus. While they can be practicing during the second week, as it was before the war started, and then they can attack. In December, Russian leader Vladimir Putin visited Minsk. Already at that time, there was the first speculation about the inclusion of Belarus in the war. On December 29th, a Ukrainian missile fell on Belarusian territory, with the National Defense Ministry there declaring the situation a provocation. In turn, on January 16th, Russia and Belarus will begin joint airborne division exercises, which are expected to last until February 1st. Day 320 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Fierce fighting for the Donbass continues. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has assured that the Ukrainian military maintains positions in 2 key cities in the Donetsk region, Bakhmut and Soledar. The occupying forces are taking the heaviest losses there. Orthodox Christians celebrated Christmas this past weekend. On this occasion, Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a proposal to establish a truce for 36 hours. Kiev rejected this proposal for fear of possible deception by the Kremlin. Just after Christmas, the Russians shelled Kherson using incendiary munitions. Subsequent strikes in Kramatorsk and other cities in the Donbass against civilian targets occurred at the same time that Moscow established a ceasefire. Therefore, we will look more suspiciously at any further attempt by Russia to reach an agreement, as it too will probably be a ploy or simple manipulation. Russian troops have placed a lot of explosives in Ukraine. Kiev believes that the east of Ukraine is the most mined area in the world. Occasionally, heavy agricultural machinery comes across unexploded bombs or mines hidden in the ground. The inconvenience to farmers is paralyzing one of Ukraine's main industries. The Russian invasion has condemned millions of people to a life of poverty. We survived because we hid in abandoned apartments. Tanks were firing at buildings, and we escaped the fire of battle. We act as a team. We cook, we clean. People come here very tired. They are dirty because they don't even have their own clothes. In the past 24 hours, the Russians have shelled Kramatorsk. According to the Kremlin, more than 600 Ukrainian soldiers were killed in the attack. However, the residents of Kramatorsk demented these reports. No Ukrainian soldiers were stationed in the buildings shelled by the Russians. There were 2 explosions. Apart from the explosions, nothing special happened. Just an ordinary day. The sound of the explosions was very loud. Frightened people jumped up from their beds. Apparently, some people hit their toes. In the dark, it happens. Air maneuvers will begin in Belarus on January 16th and are expected to last until February 1st. Russian pilots will also take part in the exercises. Russian soldiers, including reservists, called up as part of the so-called partial mobilization that has been going on since September, have been in Belarus for weeks. Their stay is related to ongoing ground troops exercises. There has already been talk since late December that the Russian Federation is assembling a new strike group to strike from the side of Belarus. According to experts, more than 300,000 conscripts have been pulled from Russia, and in fact, it is not really known how many were assigned to the Russian army during this draft. Meanwhile, the United States and Germany, in a joint statement, announced the transfer to Ukraine of U.S. Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and their German Marder counterparts. In addition, Berlin announced the transfer of Patriot batteries to Kiev. The U.S. government's decision to provide Bradley-type infantry fighting vehicles is absolutely groundbreaking. On the other hand, in my opinion, I think it is a bit late. Such vehicles were already needed by the Ukrainians in September, when the counteroffensive began. The newly announced U.S. military support package for Ukraine totals nearly $3 billion. Equipment will go to Ukraine to help especially in the fierce fighting in the Donbass. Yesterday, China ended its zero-COVID policy by reopening its borders. Tourist destinations around the world are now ready to welcome Chinese travelers back. As Chinese tourists enthusiastically prepare for overseas travel, many countries, especially South Asian countries that rely on tourism revenue, are eager to welcome them with decorations full of Chinese elements. With Spring Festival approaching, we have decorated Malacca City with festive lights and lanterns, especially the streets in the Old Town, to welcome Chinese visitors. Plans to reopen China have also given much hope and optimism to businesses in Thailand. In 2019, nearly 40 million foreign tourists contributed about 20% of Thailand's GDP, more than a quarter of which came from mainland China. There have been basically no tourists in the past 3 years since the pandemic. My income has decreased a lot. I'm happy that Chinese tourists can return and the economy will improve. I miss Chinese tourists so much. They love this dish. Come to Thailand soon. Several countries, including Japan, concerned about the rise in COVID cases in China, are nevertheless imposing restrictions on travelers from that country, suggesting that their numbers will not quickly return to pre-pandemic levels. Since most of our customers before the pandemic were Chinese citizens, I'm glad they are returning to Japan. May they return as soon as possible. Japan now requires a negative COVID test for mainland Chinese passengers taken within 72 hours before departure. It also requires that such travelers be tested upon arrival in Japan and quarantined if they test positive. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and some of our other programs. But for me, it's have a wonderful evening.